and will be enacted with one motion. There will. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'll try again. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed below on the consent agenda are considered routine or ministerial in nature and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of items unless the commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. So item 1B is approval from the minutes of October 3rd. Commissioners, if there's no questions, I'll receive a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll try to speak up a little better. We are going to rearrange the agenda just a little bit. The items 3A and 3B seem to be a little less complicated than items 2A. Commissioners, are you okay with rearranging and starting with 3A and 3B first?
Yes.
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Item 3A is a consideration and action on a preliminary plat of Cuesta Estates. This item does not require a public hearing, is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Item 3A is consideration and action considering a preliminary plat of Cuesta Estates subdivision being a certain tract or parcel comprising of 9.391 acres out of the T Hand Survey number 115, abstract number 193, the city of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas, south of 5th Street and east of Lytle Street. Here's the plat. I got a little zoomed in version of that so you can see that. Staff recommends approval of this plat with the following conditions. These conditions have been given to the applicant, but just for the record, I want to present them here. That the water line shall not be installed under the pavement, but should be in an adjacent right-of-way. The fire flow test will be required for the lots along 5th Street. That a variance request must be approved for the alternate turnaround before final plat, and notes that they need to coordinate their electric design with KPUB, and the zoning locator needs to be updated to the current zoning. And with that, again, staff approves or recommends approval with those conditions. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
And so referring to that zoning, in the surveyor's notes, it was noted as RC, which that zoning no longer exists, so it'd be an R2 zoning, is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
Is that the T-shaped area? That's the fire truck turnaround that you're
Yes,
referring to?
that's the alternate turnaround. They have worked with the fire marshal on that design. The fire marshal agrees that it will comply with the fire code, but since that is not an adopted turnaround, it does require the variance to go through the fire chief. So I need to fulfill that before we get into final plat and the civil design.
All right, commissioners, any other questions or concerns?
What size lots are they? Just out of curiosity.
There's about 4,500 square feet each, which is the minimum for the R2.
I'll make a motion, we accept the preliminary plat as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to item 3B. Consideration and action concerning a preliminary plat of the Enclave subdivision, and this again does not require a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, Drew?
consideration and action of the preliminary plat of the Enclave Subdivision, being a certain tract or parcel comprising of 8.57 acres out of the Samuel Wallace Survey, number 114, abstract 348, City of Kerrville, Kerr County, Texas, generally located at Bow Drive and Weston Loop, north of East Main Street. Here's the plat, little tighter view of that. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions: that if fire suppression or sprinkler systems will be required for these homes based on the egress and the fire code for this subdivision. A note that they'll need to coordinate with KPUB and Public Works for the electric design, connecting the existing overhead electrical and where that falls in line with the water line easement between Bow Drive and Bow Lane. Also need to update the zoning on this one. It was noted as RC. And there are 2 sets of curve data missing on the plat, noted as C1 and C3. Those will need to be updated as part of that approval. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
There's different types of fire sprinkler systems. Is that designated which type?
It is not designated which type. I believe the applicant's looking at the multi-purpose system for residential, working with the licensed plumbers and licensed inspectors to make that work through the permitting process.
It'll be a plumbing system one, not a fire line system.
That's the anticipation, yes. Any other questions?
Question on lot 1 and block 2 of phase 2. That's 40 feet wide. It says it's 4,500.6 square feet. Is that 40 feet width an issue?
We'll need to verify that as we go into final plat. The zoning code measures the width of the lot at the setback line. Obviously, being right on the mouth of that cul-de-sac, that setback line is a little skewed to the street. We'll verify that through final plat, make sure it meets that minimum 45-foot width to not have the additional rear access. And if
Okay.
it does need to be adjusted, that'll be a minor adjustment between preliminary and final plat and would not require a second approval.
Okay. And this one also needs a correction on the zoning
That's correct.
notes. Commissioners, any other thoughts or questions?
Nope.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plat as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, now we will move back up to item 2A, public hearing and resolution regarding a zoning change. Drew?
Thank you, Chairman. This public hearing, consideration, and action to recommend an ordinance to change the zoning from R1 Single Family District to R2 Medium Density Residential District on approximately 72 acres, phases 9 and 14 of the Summit Subdivision, generally located along and east of Loop 534 near Stoneledge Drive. With the recent zoning code update, we also updated the zoning map. This property was previously zoned RC through the development of the Summit. Through that, through that rezoning process, most of the residential districts remain the same. However, RC did have the most significant changes, actually converted from RC to R2. RC was the residential cluster district, which allowed a variety of housing types: single family, townhomes, patio homes, and duplexes. However, the non-traditional detached single family, being the townhome, patio home, and duplexes, also required a conditional use permit, which went through this similar public process that we're doing today. So though it was zoned RC to build any of those alternate housing types, did require notification and public hearing with planning commission and city council prior to building those other housing types. The single family was allowed by right without that additional process. In response to the comprehensive plan, as we were rewriting the zoning code, that conditional use permit approval was removed from the R2 district to allow for more flexibility in those zoning districts. As we looked at the remapping of all areas of town, the Summit was specifically looked at in the fact that it's an existing development built largely to the single family R1 standards. There were no conditional use permits for those additional housing types except a few small areas. And so the recommendation from the committee, planning commission, and council was to rezone the Summit to R1. You will see there are two pockets of R2 within the Summit. Those small pockets either had a CUP for townhomes or as a whole, those small cul-de-sacs, not every lot met the minimum of 5,000 square feet. So to be consistent with the future development of those vacant lots, those were left as R2 on those existing existing cul-de-sacs up on top of the Summit. Each of the different residential districts have their own purpose statement. The RC district, again, to allow those flexible housing types, talked about different topography, different locations, and growing areas of the city as the Summit was when it was built, or started in the 80s and into the 90s. But again, that additional housing type did require the conditional use permit process to adopt the development site plan. R1 is specifically encouraged for single-family development, detached housing, primary use of that zoning district. As we were rewriting the zoning code, R2 purpose mirrors the RC in those growing areas of town to allow the multiple different housing types, but again removed the conditional use permit requirement. So those different housing types are allowed by right in the R2 district. This change was made in an effort to allow for denser housing types, as we've come to know through the Kerrville 2050 plan, that there are limited housing options from the development community, from the public, identified a need for varying housing types to be allowed to be built. And so the R2 district was developed to accommodate that. The request today, again, is from R1 to R2 so that they can have that variety of housing types available given the topography. Here's an overall list of the uses allowed in R1 and R2. It's hard to read, so I'll skip to the next slide. This is a shorter list of the uses where there are changes to those permitted uses. You'll see that the duplex is allowed in R2, is not allowed in R1. The patio homes, a detached single family with an accessory dwelling unit, a townhome, are all allowed in R2 and are not allowed in R1, or at least not without a conditional use permit. Again, through that remapping, we did go from RC to R1 based on the existing development, and those homes largely meet the R1 standards. There are some of those homes do have a reduced setback that are now grandfathered. The R1 setback requires 25 feet from the front property line. Many of these homes were built between 15 and 20 feet. But again, the lot size exceeds the minimum lot size in R1, which is 5,000 square feet. Regarding the consistency with the Kerrville 2050 comprehensive plan, this area is identified as preservation residential, which indicates there will be a tight cluster or a dense cluster of housing developed with a balance of open space. And given the topography, you have the existing development on the hilltops. The hillsides themselves are open, knowing there were future phases for the valley to be developed. The lower valleys, again, leaving the hillsides open, is consistent with the preservation residential. The comprehensive land use plan and the comprehensive plan and the future land use plan are guiding policy for what zoning districts are applied. but it does not specify which zoning districts meet that criteria. Both the R1 and the R2 would be consistent with the preservation residential, given the type of development and how those lots are laid out, leaving that open space to balance out the denser developments. With this zone case, we do not have a preliminary plat, but given the topography, I would assume that much of the hillside is not going to be fully developed at the density that the more flat lower regions of the valleys would be. Preservation residential, again, indicates that there is that balance of open space, much like the existing development. Another example would be something akin to Comanche Trace. You have your strings of neighborhoods and homes built along the streets, and the balance of that is the open space where the golf course is. So where you have the dense housing, you still have that open space to balance that out. The primary land use in the preservation residential district, again, is consistent with R1 and R2. Single-family detached homes, patio homes, townhomes, and other single-family attached dwellings, which would be townhomes and duplexes. Around the adjacent area to the north, you have mixed-use zoning and R3 multifamily residential zoning and an existing planned development district. You have a combination of vacant land and existing apartments to the north. East and south is zoned R1, where there are single-family homes, the Summit, and some additional vacant land zoned R1. To the west, there is an R3 zoning district where there are and public and institutional for the golf course and the apartments located nearby. I do have a correction for the packet regarding the thoroughfare plan. The impact on the thoroughfare plan would be determined at the plat, so that we would have that layout. How are the lots being accessed? How many lots are needing access? Stoneledge Drive is an existing local residential road, so we don't know how many homes are proposed to be exiting onto Stoneledge Drive to access Loop 534, or if there will be an exit to the north to Chateau and Alpine, which leads out to Highway 16, Sidney Baker. Phase 14 has an existing access easement through the church property to access directly to Loop 534. Here's an aerial overview of the neighborhood as it is today. Zoomed in a little tighter with the topography and the contour lines in place. We have received a number of opposition letters and a petition. We have a total of 111 letters or signers on that petition. The solid red line is the area to be rezoned. That dashed red line around it is the 200-foot notification area required by state law. And of course, the blue pins are each of the addresses where we've received a letter of opposition. With the amount of opposition that we've received, exceeding 20% of that 200-foot area, as this moves forward to City Council, it will be required a 3/4 majority vote if the Commission recommends approval. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Commissioners, any questions before we go to public hearing?
You mentioned the zoning change from RC to R1. Can you explain again when that happened?
Yes. Following the adoption of the Kerrville 2050 plan, one of the implementation items was to revisit and review the zoning code. Through that review, the zoning code was rewritten. The RC district was replaced with the R2 district. Again, to help answer some of the housing variety needs in Kerrville, that conditional use permit, that additional public process was removed from RC. So R2 allows those different housing types by right. Several areas of town that were zoned RC through that remapping were zoned R2 since it was the closest similar district. However, looking at the Summit, because of the existing development, the size of the lots, and the majority of it is developed as traditional single family, the recommendation was to basically downzone it to R1. And that these two phases as part of the Summit original development were included in that.
Could you pull the topo back up?
Maybe.
One more, there you go.
So the topography, the contours are 2-foot contours. Every line represents 2 feet of elevation as you go up these hills. Closer those lines are, the more steep the hillside is. Now it's kind of hard to see on these screens. As you can see, at the summit, there is significant slope coming off the back of the existing lots and levels out, so to speak, as you get further down the valley.
Any other questions before we go to public hearing?
Thank you.
Okay, at 4:52, we'll open the public hearing. I'd like to remind everybody, since we have such a large crowd, I'm going to limit all speakers to 3 minutes. And so please try to stay within that 3 minutes. You'll have a little light on the podium there that will let you know when that 3 minutes is up. And the owner's representative has requested to speak first, so I'm going to allow them to speak first. When you come up to the podium, please state your name and your address for the record.
Howdy. Y'all let me know if you can't hear me. I'm happy to speak up. I'm Taylor Williams. My office address is 820 Main Street. My home address is in San Antonio. I don't know if you need my home address.
That's fine.
I'm here representing the owner. I think Mr. Paxton did an excellent job of giving you all the history of kind of what's gone on with these zoning issues. Basically, we're asking for y'all to keep things the way they were beforehand and some of the stated purposes. I have a handout, if y'all don't mind me handing it to you. It's a PowerPoint presentation that I believe was presented by the city that I'd like to go through very quickly. And it states some of the purposes of these zoning changes as well as kind of what the goals were. As you all know, the purpose of these zoning changes were to streamline things, encourage development in the city, but also to keep the zoning as similar as possible. If you turn to the first page, the overall approach to this was to preserve the existing code where possible. Mr. Harmon, as you just pointed out earlier with the first 2 things on the agenda, you commented that RC was turned into R2 on those 2 lots. As you know, Mr. Paxton pointed out, the R2 is the closest to RC in the new zoning districts. The other approach as well on this presentation was look for options to help with the housing affordability challenge, which is one of the things that this does by keeping it as basically R2, which is RC. As Mr. Paxton pointed out, there are already some basically multifamily, or not multifamily, there's no multifamily here, I'll be clear on that, but duplexes or townhomes there. We're just asking for y'all to keep the same zoning district. There are some R2 allowed plats or lots in the area.
Everything is single family. It's all single family.
Mr. Paxton pointed out that some of the areas were kept as R2. That's what I'm referencing.
Some of the lots in the Summit are currently zoned R2.
Where?
Along Vista Drive, primarily.
That's the older phases, not subject to our covenants and restrictions.
It's what the current zoning is for them right now. Continue.
Thank you. If you look at the zoning districts as under the old code versus the new code, they basically, like Mr. Paxton pointed out, are the same. The stated purpose is to keep them the same. The drafting approach was existing residential zoning districts were converted to the proposed residential zoning districts, most in alignment with their current zoning. I know I'm running out of time. There's obviously a lot more points I would like to bring up, but all we're asking for is to keep the zoning the same way it's been for the past 20-something years. And keep it the same zoning district as stated with the intended purpose under the proposed ordinance and the new zoning codes. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any other questions, Commissioners? I have quite a few speaker request forms. I'm just going to go in the order that they were handed to me, so would Mr. Robert Pill?
I'll try to speak loud enough so folks can hear me.
Okay, please state your name and address, please.
Yes, I'm Robert Pill. I'm at 2020 Vista Ridge Drive.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it's a lot. It sounds to me like a little bit of mumbo jumbo in regards to the way the. I know that's a technical term, right? But where it says medium density, does that, just for a point of information, does that mean like it could be apartments as well? Could it be?
It could not be apartments. It could only be duplexes or townhomes.
So who benefits from this change? Does anyone know that?
No.
The owner? So as far as taxes go, is it something the city will get more income from in that regard? Or, I'm sorry, my concern is that property values are something that most of us that own homes sort of have an interest in. And I certainly don't want my property values to diminish, especially being a new owner, that otherwise the expectations would have been better going forward. And I'm just hoping that everyone would consider that those that are there because we want to be. We're not here because we're going to make money on the property. We're here because we like living there. And I don't want an eyesore down at the back of my property. I don't want to have reason to move. I like staying there. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jay Carson?
I'll pass. I think is that Cornelius, Jackie Cornelius.
No, this was Carson. James Gradson? Goodson, yes, I'm sorry, Goodson.
Is this problematic?
Yes, it is.
My name is James Goodson, live at 2111 Vista Ridge Drive. You have to pardon me, I got Bell's palsy here last week, and part of my face is paralyzed. Moved here 9 years ago with the understanding it was single residence housing. And though there may be a pock mark or two of something different, the plots I have are showing something different, and that's one of the reasons I moved there. Not looking for a lot of congestion. The building of the new junior high school across from the high school is going to create enough of that. This is our loop around town. And we got all the buildings going up, the box buildings going up at the loop. In Sidney Baker, we're going to be having maybe more lights, a lot of traffic. This is going to create a lot of congestion, but mainly because the preservation of the nature of that neighborhood is one of the main reasons I moved up there. And I don't like to see something change because somebody else does not like the way it was set up originally to protect it and leave it like it really ought to be. To me, there's plenty of places around this city that you can build other homes, but changing the ordinance is there, and I don't see the relationship between the C ordinance and the R2. I see the fact that almost all of it was R1, and that's what we need to have it remain, because that's why we bought up there. And we don't, coming from Houston, I've seen what happens when you begin to get clusters, and not in this case apartments, but their apartments and that sort of thing involved in your neighborhoods. There's a big change in what goes on, and I'm dead set against it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have Roddy and Pam Clack.
Yes, right here. I'm Pam. We have the
Could
property.
you please state your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Pam Clack, and we have the properties 2124 and 2122 Vista Ridge Drive.
Thank you.
I have sent an email. I'm going to go over the key points though. R1, which is the detached, single-family residential residences, exactly describes the Summit subdivision. There's not one exception, that we are all detached, single-family residences. So we are concerned about our devaluing of our properties. We are also concerned that we understand that the seller would like to sell his land, but we think the citizens of the neighborhood should take precedence over the out-of-town seller. So those are my key points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Victoria Killeen?
Good afternoon. I'm Victoria Killeen. My husband and I own the home at 2120 Vista Ridge Drive. We've been there 12 years. Yesterday, I delivered to the Planning and Zoning Commission a petition opposing the zoning change. The petition is signed by 157 homeowners in the Summit. And right now, I'd like to briefly tell you how my husband and I ended up here this afternoon. In 2001, we began visiting friends in Kerrville. With each visit, the appeal of retiring here grew. By 2007, we were retired and we were serious real estate shoppers. We quickly learned that we were among many who had come here from the hustle and bustle of large cities. We all wanted to spend our retirement years in Kerrville with its slower pace, welcoming citizens, and scenic beauty. We found our perfect home at the Summit, a growing development built to attract retirees with marketing phrases of the premier location for your dream home. Many of us bought or built our homes in this lovely development with covenants that appeal to homeowners seeking similar environments. The developers of the Summit were selling their 300-acre master planned community, and we bought into it with the assurances that future development would be compatible with existing homes. Maps depicted the planned future phases, including phases 9 and 14, with streets and 95 available lots, many substantially larger than the currently developed lots. I have a copy of the map for the commissioners. That brings me to today. Now the city is promoting higher density housing. The owners of the undeveloped tracts of the Summit are requesting a zoning change. Their application describes their project as a desire to resume construction to provide workforce housing. With rezoning, these 95 spacious lots on our 2007 map will now become 912 crowded ones if you use their real estate marketing estimate of 12 units per acre. As current residents and homeowners, just what do we get with R2 zoning? We get increased density, just the thing most of us chose to leave behind. Along with reduced lot size, we get reduced minimum setbacks, we get attached housing, we get more traffic, more noise, and more clutter. Potentially, we might get 912 new neighbors moving in. The Kerrville 2050 Comprehensive Plan describes distinctive neighborhoods. The plan talks about creating deeper connections, developing a stronger sense of belonging among people, and strengthening neighborhood identity. All of those concepts are already in place at the Summit. Please don't try to fix what isn't broken. Commissioners, please reject the requesting zone change.
I think we have that map in our packet.
Yeah, we have a map in the copy.
This one?
That one.
Yep, we have it.
Here's mine. Do you need this?
I think we have this as well. Okay. Thank you, Chief. We have Michael Killeen.
Good evening. My name is Michael Colleen. I reside at 2120 Vista Ridge Drive in the Summit. I'm here today to oppose the rezoning of tracts in phases 9 and 14 of the Summit. In October of 2019, these properties were zoned R1. In doing so, the city recognized the character of the development that has been part of Kerrville for almost 30 years. We applaud that decision. You made the right decision. Every house built in the Summit has been a detached, single-family home. The proposed rezoning to R2 will destroy the character of our neighborhood. These two tracts are currently on the market, and real estate listings are advertising a possible density of up to 12 units per acre. This could result in up to 252 units in phase 14 and 660 units in phase 9. We don't believe the topography will allow that density, but that's what's being advertised. The sardine can concept of development is not in keeping with the Summit's character. The city of Kerrville has embraced being a popular retirement destination throughout its history. The Summit has attracted a substantial retirement community. Our neighbors moved to the beauty of the hill country to avoid the crowded urban environments that many of us left. Our neighborhood does not want to be part of a high-density urban experiment. We requested from the Planning and Zoning Office any development plans or plats for these tracts. None were on file as of our initial meeting of October 31st. The Zoning Commission should ask the applicant if these undeveloped tracts are still on the market. If not, show us their development plans. Previous promotional advertisements from the Summit developer showed the proposed development of phases 9 and 14 is detached single-family lots of a very generous size. What happened to that proposal? Where did it go? Is it vaporware? We don't believe the character of our neighborhood should be jeopardized for real estate speculation. The current R1 zoning minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet is significantly smaller than most of the lots in the developed phases of the Summit. R1 zoning will still allow a greater density than currently exists in most of the phases of the Summit. The goal of creating workforce housing should not impact the character of existing neighborhoods. We ask the Zoning Commission to save our neighborhood, deny the application to rezone the tracts in phases 9 and 14 of the Summit. All phases of the Summit should be zoned R1 to protect the character of our neighborhood. In fact, the few lots that are designated R2, we've already talked to Drew about changing those to R1. When we bought our house, we're in one of those smaller houses. All the real estate information we had is that would be R1. So we think every single lot in the Summit should be R1. So when closing, please deny this application. The residents of the Summit live, shop, work, pay taxes, and are retired in Kerrville. We live here. We're not in Tyler. We had hoped Kerrville would always be our home, but maybe not if you destroy our peaceful and quiet neighborhood. Thank you.
Can we just look at the slide that's got the pins of the homes? It shows a little bit of red zoning. Would y'all be willing to show us that? Thank you. There's a couple of people that have kind of referred to.
This is a copy.
You said the
Existing
existing zoning?
Pins,
And
because it showed some of the red zoning.
their promotional material.
Okay, thank you,
Where
sir.
it pinned the addresses.
The responses.
Okay. That one,
So this map does not have any zoning information on it.
okay.
Just a second, I get the mouse up. So this portion of Vista Ridge Drive and these vacant lots down Stoneledge and this cul-de-sac of Mesa del Sol are zoned R2 based on the lot size, the majority lot sizes along those two cul-de-sacs.
I'm sorry, the houses that are built on this ridge on more than one lot.
This cul-de-sac of Vista Ridge Drive. These lots along Stoneledge Drive and the cul-de-sac of Mesa del Sol are zoned R2. The majority of those lot sizes are less than 5,000 square feet as they're platted, which is more consistent with the R2 than the minimum 5,000 square feet of R1.
How many acres?
Most of those,
They are detached houses.
that is correct. They are all detached, single-family built houses.
How many acres?
Many houses are built on multiple lots. That's why they haven't changed their map. But many houses are on 2 or 3 lots. So
Yes.
we have previously talked to Mr. Patterson, to Drew about changing the
Mr.
zoning.
Clean, you can come to the podium.
After seeing the new map, we went down and talked to him about the existing houses and existing lots that all of a sudden showed up as R2, even though we were all thought we were R1.
Okay.
If you look at Vista Ridge, at the end of Vista Ridge, you'll find that they're large houses, some of them built on 3 lots, some of them on 2 lots, some of them on a lot and a half. So
Yes.
we don't think that's appropriate to be calling that R2.
Okay.
Thank you for clarification.
And Mr. George Lambright?
Yes. My name is George Lambright, and I live at 2021 Crownview Drive. Although I was born and raised in Houston, I'm happy to live in Kerrville now. I worked for 25 years with the DA's office in Houston until I retired from the DA's office, and then spent the remainder of my career as an administrative law judge in San Antonio while living here in Kerrville. And I've tried to dedicate my life to public service, but even if I hadn't, I'd be here today because it's just not in public interest to maintain the current zoning areas that you have in the Summit. And by that I mean the entire Summit should be zoned R1. And if you look at it, it makes perfect sense. I really don't have anything to say other than that, other than the fact that it should be R1 and there should never have been a variance to begin with. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Okay. Arnold Laxner?
My name's Arnold Lackner. I reside at 2161 Summit Crest Drive. We came here in 1997 and started building our home. We moved in 1998, and we have been at the Summit for 21 years. At the time that we bought it, the developer stressed the fact that all phases of the Summit were going to be single-family homes. And they have been. And we expected the rest of the sections of the Summit to follow that promise. Obviously, they're trying to turn that. The fact that previously, you know, the new owners say that they want to go back to what the zoning was 25 years ago. Well, that may be, except it always developed as single-family homes. That's the way the whole Summit has been. I'm concerned about the change of the structure of that development, the possible or the potential of lowering of home values, and the congestion that kind of development will bring in the traffic and up to our streets. We are a bunch of old folks up there, and we use the first responders a bunch. We see ambulances and fire engines coming up all the time. I'm concerned about what would happen. We have two two entrances to that. And I'm just really concerned about that. So I'm really against the change in zoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eugene Ellington.
My name is Eugene Duke Ellington. I live at 1840 Summit Ridge. We bought our lot in 1995, built and moved in 1997. And everybody talks about how it was. Well, I'll tell you how we thought it was. Could I see the Ellington Exhibit 1, please? I don't, how's that supposed to work, Drew?
Just 1 second.
There. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a plat of Phase 9 published by the developer. It's been around for many, many, many years. It's part of his sale brochure. And look closely at those lots. Compare them with the adjoining phases. I don't know how to operate this pointer, but anyway, you can see Stoneledge, you can see Phase 9, and you can see the other phases of the Summit. Lot sizes are consistent with phases 3, 4, 5, and 6, and all the others. That's what we were led to believe. That's what everybody else has been referring to here. We thought we had a unified subdivision, the Summit. And the Summit, by the way, if you look at Exhibit 2, where's Exhibit 2?
The Summit recap. It's up there.
Oh, okay. I can't read it from here. I thought I'd be able to read it. But it says, what does the first line up there say? Master plan residential, a community. It says 1,600 square foot minimum, and it says 65% masonry construction. That is not workforce housing. That is what we were expected. That's the developer's document. That's not something I made. Both of those are the developer's documents. And if you look at the sign on Exhibit 1, the Summit sign, anyone entering the Summit sees that sign on Stoneledge. You can't miss it. It sits at the corner of Phase 9, the phase that the developer now wants to install workforce housing in. This is a travesty. It's a betrayal. I think you should deny this motion. Furthermore, it's contrary. One of the things we got when we moved in was a copy of the Summit covenants and restrictions. And part of the purpose is for preserving the value, attractiveness, and desirability, and for the mutual benefit of the owners. That's what we expect. This is what we expect, not workforce housing. You should deny this. It's a betrayal.
Jackie Cornelius.
I want to start by saying I love Kerrville. This is where my husband and I chose to spend our lives after retirement. When we moved to Kerrville from Los Angeles, we were excited to begin a new phase. And we felt like we had found the perfect small town with a casual and relaxed atmosphere that was just right for us. That was 28 years ago. So I've lived up at the Summit for 28 years, and there's only one other person in the audience that's been here longer than that, and that's Janelle Homer. I don't know where she is. Anyway, we were there when there were only 13 houses at the Summit. After we chose to move to Kerrville, we began looking around for houses, and we found this house at the Summit, which was perfect. The view was out of this world. It was gorgeous, gorgeous sunsets and city lights at night that sparkled and twinkled. And we found activities that we would enjoy doing as senior citizens. And most importantly, we found friendships among our neighbors, knowing that some small towns change as they grow. We investigated the zoning around our house, and we were told that it was R1, single-family residential, and we believed what the city told us. The Summit is now a very well-established neighborhood. It has grown from 13 families in 1991 to over 215 families today. Changing the zoning in our neighborhood will have a profound impact on all 215 families. Everybody has a different view, and every view is gorgeous. The increase in density will reach a point where it will affect the quality of life because of the noise and traffic that will be generated. Traffic problems may spill over to the loop, possibly requiring more traffic lights. Construction of small houses on small lots as permitted in R2 zoning is bound to have a negative effect on our property values. I want to thank you for your very thoughtful consideration and hope that you will maintain the Summit in the way it is now. Thank you.
Ms. Cornelius, could you? Ms. Cornelius, would you please state your address just so we have that for the record?
2100 Vista Ridge Drive.
Thank you, ma'am. Kenneth Wilkie?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Kenneth Wilkie. I live at 2039 Crown View, Kerrville, Texas. I've been here for about 30 years in public service. I patrol the streets in fire and police. My concern here today is the density portion of this. It was our understanding that the single-family residential would be maintained and established throughout the Summit Subdivision for years to come. I'm not opposed to expanding in city projects, et cetera, but I am concerned at this time with the density, Loop 534, and multifamily dwelling brings other problems as well. And those problems would be anything you could imagine, but high populated areas, there are more problems, okay? And so that's one of my concerns. But the congestion is the main concern because we're consuming Loop 534. We don't have the traffic lights and the signals. We've already had numerous accidents there in that area, to include death. And we don't have the traffic lights, the stop signs. We haven't prepared for anything like this. But again, the Summit is a place where I decided to build and retire because it is the most quietest neighborhood in this county. And it is perfect in every way. And anything that you would do down there at the bottom of the hill would create a very high density and change all that. So I'm here today to tell you that I oppose this and I want to keep it single family dwelling. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you, sir. Lucy Wilkie.
My name is Lucy Wilkie, and I live at 2039 Crown View Drive. That was my husband that just spoke, and he's a country boy, and I don't think I could get him to live anywhere else in the city of Kerrville other than the Summit. Summit is a really special place. First of all, it makes Kenneth and I feel very young. We actually started going up to the Summit because we had friends that lived up there, and we fell in love with it. And decided that that's where we wanted to live. And it's a very special place. It's very quiet. We decided we liked it up there because we could walk our dog at night and most of the time not see a single car despite walking for about an hour with him. So anyway, the people are very special as well. As you can see, everyone in the community got together, called each other, and voiced concerns over the possible change in zoning, and we all got together discussed it, not necessarily all as a group, but individually amongst each other, and decided that this was important enough for us to show up. As I was listening to Duke Ellington speak and he showed his exhibit, I think that's very, very important because although Kenneth and I have only been there 6 years, well, 6.5 years, some of our neighbors have been there a very long time. They've retired and they've decided that this is where they want to spend the rest of their life, up at the Summit, and they chose that because of the nature of the Summit. We don't have any duplexes, we don't have any townhomes up there, we don't have any garden homes. Regardless of what the zoning is in some parts, this is the first I heard that some of it was already zoned R2 because nothing up there looks like R2 right now. The argument that this was at one time RC and the zoning commission did away with RC and changed all the RC over to R2, therefore this should also be R2, just doesn't make sense to me because the zoning commission changed it from RC to R1 even though they were changing most of the RC to R2. So there was a reason. I don't know what that reason is. I'm curious to know what it is, but I'm asking you to leave it as an R1. First of all, because I love it, but I'm here more for my neighbors who relied on those representations by the builder when they bought their property. Thank you.
And Charlie McIlvin. McIlvain, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I have a hard time with it myself some days. My name is Charlie McIlvain. I live at 128 Mesa del Sol. My wife and I's home is one of the first 3 homes built in the Summit, and although we haven't lived there the entire time, I think the issues have been well addressed today, but I want to bring up one other issue, and that's the setback. Until today, I didn't realize our home was in an R2 zone. But if you put homes across the street from us in that one little area that doesn't have room for a home as it is, if you put multifamily homes in there, we're going to have real challenges. The thing I want to address again is the setback. By eliminating the setback, people will only be able to park on the street, which will eliminate the opportunity to empty the trash or have trash and recycle picked up. The trash truck already has a hard time making that turnaround in the cul-de-sac. They have to make a 3-point turn back and forth to make the turn. If there are vehicles parked on that street, it will be impossible to even get the trash trucks, fire trucks, and ambulances in there. So we too are opposed to the zoning change. Thank you.
That is all the speaker request forms that were presented. Is there anybody else? Yes, sir.
Could I make a quick comment?
Quick comment.
In the nature of the council, if you're trying to entice people to move out here and to live here, don't pull the rug out from under them and change the zoning down the line and change all the rules. If you're going to offer them an opportunity, keep that opportunity as it's stated. And that's where we are right now. We moved in here in trust, and now we're having the rug pulled out from under us. So keep that in mind for the people you plan on enticing to move here and join us here in Kerrville. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please approach the podium and state your name and address.
My name is Bruce Williams. I live at 1907 Summit Ridge. I just wanted to ask a brief question, and would it be reasonable to ask for a poll of the attendees, whether for or against this zoning change?
Okay, we'll do that real quick. All of those in the audience that are opposed to the zoning change, please raise your hand. Okay. Just to be fair, all of those that are in favor of the zoning change, raise your hand. Okay, that's noted. All right. We do have a question for the owner's representative from one of the commissioners.
May I address
Yes.
some of the comments made? But I think he wanted to speak. Would you
Oh.
like to give him an opportunity to speak
Yes,
first?
sir.
Lyle Schick, 2110 Ministerial Drive. I wasn't going to speak, but then as I saw this, I had to come at this with a different perspective. I have a 30-year career with the United States Forest Service and fire management. I was a Class 1 incident commander. These big fires you see today, I was in command of. This topography where they won't be able to build on is steep. There is a high potential for a rapid fire movement in this subdivision. If you at the bottom put in a high density type buildings and the traffic that will cause, the response for fire into that area is going to be dramatically slowed down. So my concern there is that it's bad as it is. I have all my property down to the property line cleared out just because of my experience. I think you're going for a very potential disaster in there if you make that density that, and I do oppose it, yes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address.
My name is Rosalie Barilari. I live at 1814 Summit Spur. I'm new to Kerrville and I am new to Texas. I am a New Yorker. I have been here almost a year. And I have seen developments like this go up on Long Island where I'm from. And the end result, after all the building is done, is just disastrous for the roadways, for the hospitals. Bringing in more people in a small area creates congestion that you wouldn't believe. There was something on the San Antonio news, they were talking about traffic, and some woman wrote in that when she lived in San Antonio, her commute to work was 45 minutes. She moved to Kerrville, her commute is 6 minutes, and with traffic, 8 minutes. That tells you something. Now, I understand that we do need housing for workers, but there's plenty of vacant land where you can put up, multifamily homes. On the loop, they're putting what looks like, 5 or 6 or 7 apartment buildings. And, I feel that the Summit is such a special area. I mean, I feel privileged to live there. I really don't want to have to come into my development and see wall-to-wall homes. You'll have children on bicycles who will be getting hurt. I don't think it makes any sense, especially with all the property around here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Could you please approach the podium?
I'd like to hear from the former president of the homeowners association. That would be me.
Okay.
I'm up. My name is Alan Libby. I live at 2065 Summit Crest, have since 2005. I'd like to talk about the money. I have 2 pieces of paper laying on my desk that tell me that the value of my property has increased this year. I was a little bit surprised, but it was not totally a surprise. But now my understanding is that it's the intention of this move, rezoning, is to lower the value of my property and the properties of the Summit. I'm confused by that sort of thing, if you will. And like most of the people, I agree with everything that has been said here this afternoon. And I too protest and request that the zoning be maintained at the R1 it has been for these many, many years. Thank you very much.
May I have an opportunity to respond and then answer any questions, Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Was there a question that someone wanted to?
Yes, sir. You want me to? This was passed to me by Commissioner Waller. He would like to ask the owner's representative if there are they selling, or does the owner plan on selling this property or plan on developing it themselves?
We don't know yet. That's a good question, and I appreciate that question.
Okay.
They are, I mean, at this point, we have to figure out the zoning issue, because before you can make plans for plats, which so many people have brought up, and all the intended purposes, we have to know what the zoning is going to be. And so at this point, we don't have a plat, and as the commission knows, before any plat is finalized, y'all will see it, and it has to be approved.
We do have a plan. Exhibit 1.
Actually, Exhibit 1 did not include Phase 14 or 9 on it.
It includes Phase 9.
And there's not an approved plat for Phase 9 and 14.
Let's let the gentleman speak, please.
And if I'm mistaken on that, I'm sure it'll be pointed out, but to my knowledge, there is no approved plat for Phase 9 and 14. Look, I grew up in Kerrville. I love seeing this. I love seeing this community involvement. I love that they're passionate about it. I get that. Completely understand it. However, we keep talking about changing the zoning, changing it from R1 to RC, or R2, I'm sorry, R1 to R2. The fact of the matter is, as y'all know, it has been RC from day one. It only was changed to R1 on October 1st, 2019. RC allowed the same things that R2 allows.
With a special permit.
We are not asking to go from originally R1 single family, and there's been representation that that's the way it's been for 20 years. I understand that there's some single family homes out there, and that's all. How about all? I understand there's single family homes out there. I understand that. But it has been zoned RC the entire life of the development.
Would you let the man speak, please,
Yeah,
sir?
but it really fracks me.
And I understand.
I don't think you do.
Well, I haven't lived in your shoes, you're right. And I may not understand
You live in
exactly what
San
you're going
Antonio.
through.
But
And
I'll bet if you live in the Summit and had a house there, you'd be sitting with all of us.
you know something? I don't know that I would or not.
Who do you represent? Who do you represent in this?
I represent the owner, MKB. Correct.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Michael Breedlove, MKB Limited. And so, Commission, we're asking you to keep it the same. When this was presented, when the zoning changes were looked at, the stated purpose was to keep the zones the same. If you look at your agenda on 2A, it's my understanding that the staff, well, I think I grabbed the wrong thing, but it's my understanding the staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was recommending the change to R2. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. I believe that's correct, and that the staff is recommending that to a change to R2. I think, the point I want to end on is, we keep talking about change, zoning changes, change from R1 to R2. We're asking you to keep it the same that it's been for 20 years. We're asking you to keep the zoning the same, to follow the stated purpose, as I showed y'all in the PowerPoint presentation that was presented. I'm asking you all to follow what was represented, what was stated, to match up the zones to where they match up, and to keep it the way it essentially has been since it was originally zoned. Were there any other questions that y'all have?
Drew, would you clarify your position?
May I rebut? May I rebut?
No.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We've given everybody multiple opportunities to speak. I think we have all have a pretty good consensus on the way the room feels. Sir, you have not had a chance to speak yet.
I spoke, but I.
I'm sorry, the gentleman behind you.
My name is John Love, 1836 Summit Ridge Drive. I live there with my beautiful wife of 60 years. And we've been in the Summit since 1996. Prior to living on the Summit and prior to being disabled, I was a real estate appraiser, general certification. I appraised everything from industrial plants to single-family homes. I really feel like I have an insight into what's going on here. And I think these folks have presented it well tonight. I want to say this. It's been brought up over and over and over that the property has been R2 or whatever it is for 20, 25 years. This is the first time, the very first time that the residents of our subdivision have had an opportunity to voice their opinions on what it should be. It should not be R2. It should be R1. And that's what my friends, my neighbors, that's what we want. We appreciate you more than you could know. I have sat in your seats many, many times. I have sat on city councils many, many times. So I know there's pressure. I know it's tough. And I admire you for taking this job. But remember, this is the very first time that we've had any input into what that property should be zoned. Vote it down. Vote it down. Thank you so much. And thank you for
Gentleman in the dark coat.
I just have one question. It's not really a comment. I just wanted to know if y'all are going to vote today in public, or if you're going to vote later in public, and if so, what day?
Eventually, we'd like to today. Yes, sir, in a black coat.
My name's Charles Williams. I'm building a house at 2004 Crown View. I wasn't planning on talking today, but there's something that needs to be said. I'm new to the area, but I've listened to people. And the legalistics of zoning, that's one thing. But what people thought they bought, isn't that the important thing here?
Yeah.
And I would imagine that some people in here right now feel like they've been lied to.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, I'm not calling anybody a liar, but I'm saying people feel like they've been lied to. They thought they bought something, and now we're hearing, no, they didn't, they bought something else. But the developer told them what they thought they heard, and I think we've heard enough of that to know that's the case. So what I'm asking is, whose side are you on? You want to take care of the people who live here, who thought they bought something? Or do you want to get on the side of a bunch of out-of-town liars? That's it.
point do I call this on?
Sir, this is relative to what we saw.
My name is Michael Colleen again, but when we bought our house, the real estate listing had R1 on that listing. I've talked to other neighbors who's, when they bought their house, they had R1 on the listing. I spoke to Drew about the zoning history of the Summit. All we know is this RC. We don't know how far back that RC went. I have no idea. I asked the question. I was in Drew's office and I said, can we look at the zoning history of some of these tracts to figure out where we were? Our real estate listing had R1, other people's had R1, and now we have one previous map of zoning in Kerrville showed RC. What is the zoning history? And you'll find out that everything built in that Summit was built to R1 standards. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope you deny this application.
I'm going to take one more comment, please. The gentleman back here in the blue coat.
Thank you. My name is Jim McGinnis. I reside at 1830 Summit Point Drive. Unlike Mr. Love, who's been here for decades, we're probably the newest owners up in the Summit. We've been there less than 30 days. And I mean, property values are one thing, and I understand that. But I guess my bigger concern right now is, while R2 and RC may be close together, there was one big difference with RC, and that was that there had to be special approval. And now we will lose that, and we will have no ability to withstand some development that really is detrimental to our neighborhood. The other thing that comes to mind as well is, while the current owners may have great intentions, very honorable in what they plan to do, they're not sure if they're going to sell it. So if this gets zoned R2 and it's sold to another developer, we have no legal recourse if they do whatever they want to do that fits R2. So I really feel like we are being left kind of to hang out to dry, if you will, if this goes to R2 for those two reasons. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate your
All right, is there anybody that has something to say that hasn't already been expressed? Yes, sir?
My name is Dillard Hatch. I live at 2139 Vista Ridge Drive. I've listened to all this, and I vote with these people, of course. One of the things I know that maybe nobody knows, we have all the small lots. I live on the end of the cul-de-sac with 3 lots, but we have all the small lots, which they haven't been able to sell. The developers came in there, cleared the trees off, threw them on other people's lots, took a bulldozer, and bulldozed crap onto this lady's lot. And then I'm talking to a builder 3 days ago. He didn't give me his name, but I asked him what he was up to because he's up there looking at the lots. And he said, well, we need to build affordable housing. And I don't know if you've ever been up there and looked at the terrain. You can't build affordable housing just because of the terrain. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody's comments. We appreciate that. We have one question.
Stan Baumgartner, 2028 Crown Ridge Drive. It's just a detail. I'm not really well versed on townhomes. So before I came, I Googled townhomes versus apartments, and basically they said they're the same. It may be technically different, but that they revert back and forth, and they rent them and all kind of things. They're just very similar. So if we end up with a bunch of rental property there, well, it's just going to hurt our property value even worse. Thank you.
Okay, at 5:51, I'm going to close public hearing. Drew, would you mind commenting on the recommendation regarding this zoning change from the staff's point of view?
Yes, you will see in the packet the recommendation based on the consistency with the Kerrville 2050 comprehensive plan as the preservation residential, get back to that slide. As preservation residential, this is consistent with the comprehensive plan and staff supports that based on those policies. The preservation residential does allude to the fact that there needs to be a balance of open space along with the developed lots, regardless of the zone district, regardless of the size, whether that's R1, R1A, or R2. Again, the preservation residential indicates it's residential and does not dictate which zoning district. So based on the policies written in the comprehensive plan, it is consistent, and that is staff's recommendation based on those policies. We'll say that with the public hearing process is obviously to hear from those that have vested interest in the adjacent properties and the existing subdivision. That's where the commission and council come into play. You guys get the position to listen to both the public and the policy and weigh those two together to make that final decision.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions that you have for Drew or comments or concerns that you'd like to express?
One comment?
Yes, Rustin.
You mentioned consistency with the 2050 plan, but Drew mentioned consistency with the 2050 plan, but there's also language about, and it was brought up about maintaining neighborhood identity. So I think this would be inconsistent with maintaining neighborhood identity.
There you go.
Anyone else?
I just had two comments. The developers referring to meeting the housing affordability challenge. I think it's already been said, but with a construction background, that topography is an enormous expense added to any construction, and that immediately factors out the affordability factor of anything built up there. And then my other concern is that the developer has represented this property all along based on some of the publications that you guys presented as single-family detached homes only. So I stand opposed.
I've always taken the position that, and all of y'all need to know that Kerrville did not have what would be called an up-to-date zoning code. And so this 2050 consolidated the number of zoning codes from
49 to 17.
And so when you do that much compression, you have overlaps and problems and issues that come up. And I've taken the position that if you're going to do that, there are going to be exceptions that are going to cause problems and cause additional effort to design the right result. And so RC, unknown throughout the land, R1, R2 is what's standard throughout the country for use in zoning, was intended when the original development was laid out that it would be flexible enough to do something. But again, I think that 2050, and speaking to the style of life in Kerrville and what we're trying to do, I'm in opposition to what we're trying to do.
Our new commissioners, down in, are there any comments or concerns you'd like to express? All right. Commissioner Waller, Chairman of most highest integrity, would like to make a motion. Based on review of tracts 9 and 14, review of the topographical maps of these tracts, the lack of any preliminary site plans, and the overwhelming negative response by the current residences within 200 feet of the notification area, I make a motion to deny the zoning change from R1 to R2 as proposed. That is our motion.
I will second that motion.
We have a second. All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Motion carried 7-0.
Is this final?
No.
No, it is not. This will go before city council.
Excuse me,
And-
Chairman.
No.
The
No?
applicant, excuse me, ladies and
I'm
gentlemen.
sorry.
The applicant does have an opportunity to appeal to council.
Okay.
That request has to be received within 10 days.
Okay.
And that will be, once that's received, that'll be processed and put on the city council agenda. There are no mail-out notifications for that. It is an advertisement in the newspaper and the website for the council agendas. So if there's any interest in follow up on that, you can contact our office or keep an eye out for the council agendas.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you. And we do have,
Our decision is made.
Our decision is made. Just keep.
Do we need to go wherever he's thinking of going?
If you would like to attend the city council meetings, keep an eye on the website, the city's website, on those agendas. And if this item pops up on that agenda and you want to speak to it, I would encourage you to go do so.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Yes, ma'am.
The 157 signatures that were on the petition and all of the statements, is that gonna all transfer to city council if the appeal
Yes.
is heard there?
yes, it will.
All right.
Chairman, we do have a little bit of more business. Would you like to take a short recess?
Commissioners, want to take a break?
Sure, let the room clear out.
Yeah.
I thought
Okay,
that-
we'll
let
take
the room clear out.
a 10-minute
Just a staff
recess.
report, but
Thank y'all for doing this.
Did a really good job up there.
Thank you.
thank you all very much. Just wanted to go over a quick staff update for you guys so you know a
Would
little
you
bit what's
state
coming.
your name?
My name is Bob Waller. Do have an agenda stacking up already for December 5th. We've got one zone case, one conditional use permit, sign variance, and 2 plats. And then our next meeting will be January 2nd.
Just one in December?
Just one in December, yes, sir. And then pending for you guys, when we keep
Which date in December?
5.
December 5th.
The second one is
January 2nd.
Right. Yeah, I don't have any cases that really met that time frame, so we're pushing out to January 2nd for those next ones.
Motion to
Um,
I always have some photo around.
the big change that's coming at some point, we keep moving it back and back as we look into it. Code Review Committee is looking at the subdivision ordinance again in the end of January. They kind of had their platting and subdivision 101 from our consultant and Mr. Hayes. So they got their introduction to what subdivisions are about, what the ordinance means. Went through a few pieces that actually have some decision factor to it. It's not just lovely state law that we get handed. They're gonna look at that draft in January. We'll see if they get it out of committee at that meeting or not. So that one's still pending down the road. I think that is it. You think of anything else, Guillermo?
No, sir. Hey, thanks for your discussion
Thank you, guys.
this
Yeah,
time.
thanks for the explanation.
I hope I actually explained it well enough for.
We understood
We
it.
stood.
I learned something new.
All right, any other comments from commissioners? 6:08, we are adjourned.
Well done.
Mr. Tuttle, welcome.